So, ladies and gentlemen, just a sec. Right. So, let's go for the second talk, which goes about the conus medullaris and closed spina bifida. Well, we're very familiar with spina bifida aperta, and we know that these common signs of Arnold-Chiari malformation type 2, which is the banana sign or the lemon sign. These are signs that's been published in the mid-80s, so that's really nothing new for us. And we know about the outcome and how open spina bifida looks like. However, the younger brother of open spina bifida is spina bifida occulta or closed spina bifida, and in fact it does have a similar prevalence like open spina bifida of about 2 in 1,000. And well, although we always said, well, closed spina bifida doesn't do any harm on the baby, well, that's not really true, because they all got a tethered cord problem, and this tethered cord will cause neurologic sequelae in about 85% of the cases, urologic dysfunction in about 3/4 of the cases, and limb dysfunction in whichever way you'd like to, or scoliosis in at least 40% of the cases. Now, these cases, closed spina bifida does have an impact on postnatal life as well. It's not just open spina bifida. If you ask the neurosurgeons, they always say they'd like to do the operation sort of 6 months after birth. But what is of importance is that the operation is done before neurologic sequelae happens, because these neurologic sequelae won't be as easy to go back. So they'd like to do the operation, the untethering operation, at about 6 months after birth. Now, you could also argue, well, there's nothing really to know about this. You see it after birth, at least if it looks like this or like this. But there are other signs, or actually minor signs like these ones, where it's not as easy to identify closed spina bifida by the pediatricians. And it may be just a hairy bit here, or even a dermal sinus here, which is very difficult to identify, and there are a lot of pediatricians who would actually miss this diagnosis, and these babies will get evident, or will get abnormal with time, with about 2 to 3 years, showing signs of neurologic sequelae. So there is a need for a prenatal detection of closed spina bifida, of spina bifida occulta, and And in fact, if we talk about occult spina bifida, we talk about several cases. It's not just one case. There are skin-covered lipomyelomyelinoceles, like you can see here in these cases. There are lipomas continuing of the filum terminale. There are just tethered cords, which is called tight terminal filum. There's diastematomyelia, a separation, a split cord, and there are signs of dermal sinus. All actually go ahead with a tethered cord problem, means with a longitudinal growth of the baby, the cord, the conus medullaris will be fixed at the lower level. This stretches the cord and causes the damage on the nerves. Now, by normally assessing, or by the general assessment of the spine, we actually miss these cases because we look to the cerebellum, and these will look absolutely normal in these cases because there's no Arnold-Chiari malformation in these cases. And in fact, when we look to the spine itself, we move from one ossification area to the other one, and we look to the skin, but so far we didn't really focus too much on the spinal cord itself, which can be easily identified by looking to the middle, by looking to this black area here, which got a white line in between, which ends with the conus medullaris and with the filum terminale in these cases. Now, if you look to these cases, these are all cases of closed spina bifida, and you can easily identify this one by saying, well, why do you need to look to the spinal cord and to the spinal column in this case? It's very obvious that there is something wrong in this case. Yeah, you're absolutely right, but on the first glance you may miss this one or misinterpret this one as an open spina bifida, but if you look closely to the spinal column here, you see that it's very clearly separated and it's not going into this area. Same is true with this one, but these ones will be are much more difficult to identify, and the only thing you can clearly see that the conus medullaris doesn't end where it should be at level 2-3, but it ends up at the very lowest point here of the spine. Here's the normal comparison. You can clearly see the difference between those cases here. Now, we could actually leave it here and say, well, just focus on the conus medullaris, it's fine. But when you look to to studies looking to the reproducibility of assessing the level of the conus medullaris, you see that it's actually not too easy to really identify the level correctly, because it's rather difficult to really count. Oops, I'm sorry. Count the vertebrae correctly, so the interoperator variability of assessing this level is rather difficult. Therefore, we supposed to do a different measurement just by, or to measure this distance to assess the height, just by taking a measurement between the conus medullaris and the last vertebral body, and we called it the conus distance. And we actually did it in 300 consecutive ultrasound examinations just to get an idea about the height. And, well, this is just a general normal population with a mixed gestational age. And can clearly see that the repeatability of these measurements were good. And we plotted against the femur length because we saw that the femur length best correlated with the conus distance. And the handy thing was that the conus distance was the femur length minus 8. This gave us the expected conus distance. And if we look to set scores in the normal population, then it's obviously 0. And if you look to those ones in the occult spina bifida group, that was minus 4.5, showing that there was a severe shortening of the conus distance in occult spina bifida. And if you look to the absolute numbers, there it's obvious again, it's 38 versus 15, but keep in mind that these numbers were gestational age or femur length dependent. Now, let me just show you some of those cases to get a better idea of what I mean. As I already mentioned, those ones with meningocystoceles, together with lipo or myelomeningocystoces, they were quite easy to identify, and the only challenge was to really state that these are not open spina bifida cases. First of all, in all of these cases, as I previously mentioned, the cerebellum looked normal, and if you try to identify the spinal column in these cases, you can see them here. And this indicates that it's really not open spina bifida. This one is a bit more difficult. Again, on the first glance, you could just miss this case. Imagine this baby is in a dorsoposterior position. You will not really identify this abnormality on the first glance, especially as the spine, the cerebellum looks normal again. But if you look a bit closer here, then you can identify the ossification area here, and you can see that the spinal column is slightly separated. And if you try to identify the spinal column again, the spinal cord again, and you can see it here. If you try to measure the conus distance, you see it's severely shortened as a sign of a spinal lipoma, which is with this ossified here together with a tethered cord problem. Here's another case, which is the most recent one that we had. Again, on the first glance, nothing really special on this spinal column, or on this spine. But if you try to identify the conus medullaris here, you see that it ends up in a level where you wouldn't expect it to be. It should be sort of L2, L3, so closely to the kidneys, and you see that it ends up on this position here. If you try to measure it, severely shortened again, normal cerebellum. Now, let's go to a transvaginal scan because we expected there's an anomaly, and you can clearly identify several anomalies at the same time. First of all, here's a dermal sinus. Can you see this here? At the same time, there's a bony spur, a bony spur here, separating the spinal column into two bits with a syrinx and a diastematomylia. So all the different bits together in one single case. Baby's been born now. This is the skin with the dermal sinus, a bit larger than just a small dermal sinus, and this is the spinal cord in the theater. You can clearly see the syrinx here and the diastematomylia. So I'll come to an end. So occult spina bifida consists of a mixture of several anomalies which all go together with tethered cord. They can also cause neurologic sequelae, and there is a need for us to look closer to this area. Tethered cord can easily be identified, and it can be quantified by looking to the conus distance, and the expected conus distance is just femur length -8. Thank you very much.